Thank you so much for having us today. And thank you to the audience for showing up with your interest and passion around human risk and remedying some of the, um, obviously, the risks that humans pose. We wanted to get together today from a cyber insurance perspective to talk a little bit about what we're seeing and really the ways that we hope to shape this landscape. As you can tell from the slide, really, truly, year over year, we're really seeing that the most prevalent entry point root cause of cyber events tends to be related to human risk in some way, shape, or form, whether that has to do with accidental disclosure of information, falling for a phishing email, or wire transfer fraud. And so as an industry, as we see all of these losses year over year fit into this trend, we think that it's important that we address it through proper underwriting. So we've brought sort of some of that life cycle into the room today from an underwriting perspective, from myself, from a risk management perspective, with Violet Sullivan and Julian Silvestro from the brokering standpoint to talk about how he advocates for his clients and sets them up for success. So we hope to dig into that. We hope to have a very interactive and interesting panel. And I think that how we'll structure this is really our group will be asking questions back and forth in sort of a free forum sort of format. But I wanted to start by asking Julian, what trends are you seeing in the cyber loss landscape, given that you deal with a breadth of different clients and cyber insurance carriers?
Yeah, it's a great question, Maria, and thanks again to Living Security for having us join today's conference and for giving us a session here. When we look at the trends in losses, we continue to see an uptick in the volume of loss activity. So we track losses on usually a quarterly basis, and so far in Q1 of 24, we've seen over 450 losses with just our clients alone. That's a remarkable uptick from Q1 of last year, which would have been about 330 or so losses. And I think there's a couple of interesting stories there. 24 and the back half of 23 has really been the story of the sort of supply chain loss, if you will. So a single loss event that occurs that has a cascading effect. So for those of you who reside in the space, this will not be much of a surprise, but things like the Change Healthcare incident or the Move It supply chain vulnerability, those things have really caused significant increase in the number of claims that the industry has seen.
Or possibly CDK as of yesterday.
Exactly. These things continue to happen at sort of what seems like an increasing rate. But I think the interesting thing about, what we see in most of those cases is there is some element of human error that persists throughout each one of those instances. We also see it in large single events. So, when you look back at the MGM event, last year, there's consistently a human element. We certainly do still see events that are kind of, what I would consider a scan and exploit. So, true exploitation of a vulnerability. Certainly those are out there, but I think more often than not, we see events that have some significant or some critical component that has to do with the human element of risk, and whether that's giving away, credentials or doing a poor job of maintaining cyber hygiene. So think, not enough folks to manage a network, manage an environment. All of those things kind of coalesce under the potential human element aspect. So, the loss environment continues to, shift and expand. And I think the industry is looking to meet that by, taking a deeper look into those types of controls or risk management procedures that organizations are doing to address the human element. So with that, Violet, would love to hear from your perspective about just the balanced approach to managing human risk within an organization.
Well, I love you starting off with like the claims trends, right? Where a loss is going, but I think it's even more important to explain, because I know that this is a broad audience. We usually talk in groups of other insurance nerds like ourselves. One of the things 10 years ago, before I even got on the insurance side, that I realized we have to bring up is there's a difference between a carrier and broker, right? The carrier, insurance carrier, or the insurer is the one that, like Maria and I represent, the body or group that's writing the check. They're the ones that if a loss comes, they're the ones that have to pay for it, but they're also the ones that are sometimes providing, which we can get to, risk management services, some bells and whistles on the front end to make the policy focused on loss mitigation. So not just say, hey, break glass in case of emergency, which a lot of policies still do, but also here's some tools and tool sets to align with your security roadmap. So believe it or not, a lot of insurance prevention and risk management is focused on aligning with that security roadmap. And we really want to also encourage you security professionals to get better budgets for what you need and get more resources and be able to prioritize what you have moving forward, including human risk management. I only wanted to take that time to just differentiate. I think Julian is probably the best of the three of us to explain what he sees in the market, because different insurance carriers have different appetites. There might be one that serves auto dealerships and one that really likes to write healthcare. And Maria and I represent two different ones, and we're on different sides, right? She's on the underwriting and risk management side. I work with, I have experience on the reactive forensic side, but also the preventative side to work with how to make the problems in the claims and crisis more efficient. I think it's helpful to think that Julian, I just think future, it's helpful to think you have more of a market view because you're helping your client, the company, ABC that you represent, to find the right fit when it comes to what their worst case scenario is and making sure they're financially covered for that worst case. And from a human risk management perspective, I'll simplify it to say, I think the biggest issue that we have in a cyber risk perspective is not all these hackers, out here in cybercrime. That's one of the issues. But the biggest issue is not sci-fi. It's saying, as a world, when the internet came out and everything started being connected, there was a digital transformation and this idea that we just add more equipment, we become a better company, we become more advanced. And with every new equipment and material, we didn't have a mature security perspective to go along and build security by design, like privacy by design. We instead just start throwing computers into hands of users. And we never, until the last 10 or 11, 12 years, gave any kind of instruction on how to use the equipment. And it's like, yeah, let's go put a chainsaw in everyone's hands. And expect these lumberjacks to learn how to do use a chainsaw in their daily life, and not realize that there's repercussions and that what they have is what they're giving to their users is not just valuable, because I know IT people always say, like, you're giving this valuable information. You're also giving humans who create errors something without possible proper guidance on the technical safeguards you could make, which is, limiting access to least privilege, or even the, training aspects and the education of making sure that user is aware of what they can do and what they have access to on that computer. And the example I'll leave with is I did a tabletop a couple of years ago, and the CFO was reading the prompt and said, all devices are impacted whatever. They took the word devices and they go, well, device is just a computer, right? Like my phone, that's not a device. And we were like, is it a corporate phone? Can it access your email? Can it access these things? And she said, yes. And then we had to, in the middle of the tabletop, explain to the CFO what it means to have an infected device. So I will just kind of bring that up to say the balanced approach to this is not to go full on into technology without addressing the risk. And just like you learn in CISO school or studying for the CISSP, you have to have a holistic approach to security. So part of that is not just the training, but it's also realizing we cannot be perfect even in training our individuals. So we need to have that cyber insurance piece as a part of the risk mitigation to say, this is our in case of emergency so that we don't go under if we have a human error issue. So how, on the underwriter side, since I don't have that experience, Maria, how are you writing, how are you measuring risk as a cyber underwriter when it comes to this human element that is so hard to pin down?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And I think candidly, we're not doing enough, right? I do think when we receive a cyber insurance application, we can be talking about, we'll just say 5 or more pages of information representing your different controls, your policies, your procedures, how you're addressing elements that could turn into human risk, such as email controls and what you're doing at the firewall, in front of it and behind it in terms of patching vulnerabilities and all of that. But I think that what we're not collecting enough of is just information in general that's qualitative and quantitative around what is being done to put the attention and address the fact that actually people are one of your cybersecurity assets as well. They don't have to be looked at as the weakest link. They could be the strongest link. They could be the first line of defense. They could be the last line of defense, depending on what's going on in the environment. And I think what we really want to look for is whether or not, from like a cultural perspective, from a risk management perspective, the company is taking human risk very seriously by implementing frequency in their training and education program. So do you have a cyber awareness training and education program? How often is it being deployed is really what we want to know. We're not getting that kind of information. I'll tell you kind of what we get versus probably what we want. So within the applications, which admittedly the cyber market has created, and there are many varieties of these, and Julian, I have sympathy for you when it comes to that, but we're getting limited information. And really all that we're getting is whether or not an organization has a cyber awareness training program in place, the frequency, which the boxes are, semi-annual, annually, right? And whether or not there's a phishing simulation that's put into place, which is a wonderful tool to have. It closes the behavior gap when it comes to click rates across the organization. So how often your employees are actually falling for the phishing simulation, and over time, how that gap is closing from a percentage perspective, that's great. Most of the time, we're not getting indication of what the click rate is. Sure, you could be rolling out phishing simulations and we have no idea if half of your staff is actually falling for those simulations and the gap is not closing. So there's just not enough visibility. I think in a better world, not a perfect world, we would like to know behavior analytics about how the employee is interacting with their digital environment, and whether or not there are the appropriate safeguards in place to prevent things like, surfing parts of the web that perhaps might be vulnerable, using personal email, things like that. And also kind of what websites that they venture out to in general, and perhaps the health of those websites, having appropriate controls in place to block that. But also, I think we would like to have an understanding of exactly how frequent the employees are being trained and how often that material is being interchanged. If you put your employees in front of the same exact material every single year, they're just gonna like hit the snooze button in their head and get through the test, whatever, and learn nothing. And also, we all know that this is an evolving landscape over the last year. Think about things like deepfakes. We've heard stories in the headlines about entire Zoom meetings being hosted in a deepfake environment, tricking someone into wiring millions of dollars to a bad actor. This is evolving, and you need training to address those evolving needs as well. So I think that's a lot to chew on, but I think that leads perfectly into my question for Julian, which is, how are you helping your clients when they go to apply for insurance so that they can kind of tell their story in what is a very binary application?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's one that we deal with all the time, because I think, one of the things about being in this space is it's also extremely difficult to, in a binary way, talk about a control environment, right? Every day I talk to CISOs of organizations of all shapes and sizes, and they'll tell me things like, well, I can tell you with a certain level of confidence, let's say 99% confidence, but it's extremely difficult for me to say 100% yes, 100% no to any given question. And so what we really focus on at Marsh is a couple of things. So the first thing is we've built our own application for clients to use. The advantage of it is that it is usable by every insurance market in the world. So, we don't have to keep going back to our clients and saying, hey, now we want to go to this other insurance company, so you need to complete another application. So we've created kind of a consolidated application. The other, and I think, far more important component is that we are trying to move away from kind of the binary approach of, do you have MFA? Yes or no? More towards a explain the way that you utilize MFA. Explain the way that you train your employees, that you do phishing simulations, that you run tabletop exercises. I think that, for a long time, cyber application has been, what I think of as kind of like a coloring book of, when you complete the application, you've now drawn the picture that you want to color in, but it's still just the black and white, the white of the page and the black of the lines that you drew it. And so our application is trying to develop a way that you can add more context, that you can kind of color in the lines, so to speak. And then, the last piece, which I use a lot, is running an underwriting meeting or an underwriting call where, I will prepare my client through, multiple kind of prep sessions to present their control environment and their risk management practices to the underwriters. It really does a good job of going even kind of that next step in terms of, now you've colored in the coloring book, but now you're making it a masterpiece instead of just using crayons, right? So I think it's a way that you can really kind of dive deep into some of these areas that the application doesn't do a great job of really kind of sussing out. And, a broker, I think, from my perspective, our whole function is to help clients better navigate an insurance market. There's many different ways that you can kind of take that. So it can be negotiating with insurers to get the most competitive terms, conditions, pricing, but it can also be preparing you to address that market so that you're sharing all of the great things that you're doing in your organization from a control standpoint, from a training standpoint, from an employee monitoring standpoint. When we have human risk at the levels that they occur in the cyberspace, we can't just be saying, yes, we train our people, twice a year. That's just not enough.
You're bringing up something that I was at RSA 2 months ago, and someone, after speaking, like they came up and they're like, when are you a lot of times security people take it out on us in the insurance industry as a whole, right? Or any misconceptions of like the applications are too long, this is a pain in the ass, blah, blah, blah. So when they said, when are you guys, they meant when is insurance, cyber insurance going to be able to correlate direct controls with direct price reductions? And I said, well, if you think about insurance, we're going based on past history, but we're riding in a cyber market that is only futuristic thinking. So you can't directly do that. But you pointed out something awesome, which is like my response should have been, besides like screw off or whatever I said. I'm just kidding. My response should have been to say, that's the purpose of a broker, is to be able to explain your controls to different groups, knowing what the carrier has an appetite for. So if you know that this specific carrier really emphasizes the controls of MFA and training, and maybe they love tabletops, right? You're able to paint that masterpiece for them based on it. So even if to that guy's question, you may not be able to tie a specific control to a specific reduction in price. It's just not mathematically possible. You can see better pricing when you have a broker that is able to paint that picture and put it in front of you instead of just the checkbox application.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's exactly what we're here for. We're here to drive competition. We're here to make sure that our customers are, have a expert who can help them get the best options, get the best terms and conditions. Because the other thing is, much like security technology, buying one piece of name a thing isn't exactly the same as buying it from someone else, right? And so navigating that with an expert who sits in the space all the time is really, really critical. So Violet, you sort of hit on frameworks a little bit, but I'd love to kind of circle back to that of, there's a lot of frameworks out there, right? But is there one that seems to be the kind of predominant one that the insurance industry really looks at and really kind of indexes on more than others?
Maria, all I can think when he says frameworks is the one that you built from the ground up. Is
I knew that's
was in charge of her risk management platform was called Frameworks. So it always makes me think of working with her on it. I think there's a misconception in that insurance is fluffy and we don't go by the same rules. But we go back to NIST just like security professionals. I think we acknowledge too that we see every different industry. So we see that HIPAA and high trust was built on NIST, right? The same rules and technology. You see the word safeguards and administrative, physical, and technical safeguards. We see this stuff being replicated in every state and in every different industry framework and compliance structure. So we see that there are technically accepted standards. We really value those NIST standards. And of course, we would love everyone to have these, gold star ones like ISO 27001 and, I'm blanking on all the other ones, but there's all of these ones that if they apply to you, software developers, et cetera, you can go prove. We know that doing that means you put extra time and energy into making sure that you are compliant, right? It takes a lot of work to get those gold stars. So we love seeing that kind of thing from an insurance perspective, but it doesn't always mean the same thing. In fact, I'm pretty sure, Julian, wasn't the crypto company, was it FTK? I don't remember the acronym, but the crypto company, the Sam guy went under. Yeah. I'm pretty sure they were ISO compliant.
They were.
And yeah. So it doesn't tell, even though it's more about how they meet the compliance requirements rather than the checkbox.
Yeah.
It's really about that culture versus just checking boxes, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. And I think that too, when it comes to the framework that you choose, perhaps you involve a consultant when it comes to that, depending on the size of your organization and who you have involved internally from like a professional aspect. Really the point being that there are frameworks that are out there that you can align yourself with. I think that, to Violet's point, it's very important that you're aligned to the correct framework, but it will guide you and provide some consistency so that you understand kind of what's expected, so that if something does happen, you at least know that there was an effort to be compliant and that will be received very well.
I think the effort is really important, Maria, because I was going to ask, how are we insurers specifically working to improve the visibility of what we care about, what we see, like the transparency there. But I think too, effort, I've always told people, even if you can't pay for a $50,000 risk assessment, if you can open an Excel spreadsheet, definitely not preferred, but a risk assessment is questions. It's questioning different departments. It's asking and addressing the issue of risk. So I think the effort is really important, because we see a lot of people, especially on the insurance side, we don't see all perfect companies. We see everything in the range of zero security. I talked to someone once that didn't even know what HIPAA was, and they were a covered entity, to all the way to, the best and most compliant, highest and best security standard of a company. So I think that effort is, do you have people assigned to focus on it, on risk management? Do you have plans in place for moving forward? Are you moving forward on those plans? I just think it's a really good point, Maria, to point out that effort rather than just the compliance and human risk management check the boxes.
I'm gonna step in. Our time is up, but I'm gonna put the three of you back on the spot for, I have one I think really important question for everyone that's just joining us back from the other breakout rooms. We have three individuals here that have been speaking on kind of cyber insurance and from different perspectives. And I think the question, and please keep it brief because everyone's gonna get mad at me for running over time, is how does like a security awareness professional, human risk manager, how do they get more knowledge around how insurance works? I remember back to my time running cybersecurity, and I felt like it was such a black box. And like, I had no idea where to go to learn, to know how I can impact risk on the insurance side. So maybe just a brief snippet, like if you have any recommendations or resources to learn about how like my role in cyber impacts how cyber insurers work, that would be helpful.
Can I tee up Julian though for the broker side, or Maria, did you have something?
Oh, definitely. Well, I wanted to jump in and say this. Yeah, that was definitely going to Julian. Absolutely. But I think that, Drew, I think it's important for you to be a part of the insurance purchasing process. I think there are several people left out that need to be included. So you need to align yourself with whoever that is. Is it the CFO? Is it the head of risk management? You need to make sure that you're able to be a stakeholder in that process, and your broker is going to be your biggest advocate when it comes to learning what the coverage does, which is I think there are so many misconceptions about it. So Julian, over to you.
I want to team up more, because I know he's not going to say this. He's not going to disparage any other types of working with this, but too often, I mean, we use the term insurance buyer. Too often, the insurance buyer, and I see this a lot, I'm in Texas, a lot of small towns and stuff, and small to medium companies will go to one broker for everything: property, casualty, executive risk, D&O, all of these different ways and types of insurance. Just like if I went to some of the same place for my car insurance, life insurance, home insurance, and health insurance. That's not done, right? We have a patchwork of different things for different reasons. My biggest tee up for him is that there's too many brokers that don't understand how cyber works in combination with coverages. You need a cyber specific broker. So not just, push your way into that conversation about insurance, but make sure that you're the person who is literally comparing the market for you. They understand technology and cyber risk. If you don't, you need to raise your hand at the executive level and say, our insurance person doesn't understand, and the harm could be they could have a $10,000 sublimit for ransomware, and all of a sudden what you think is a $5 million policy is now cut down at your worst case scenario. Okay, Julian, sorry now.
Yeah, I would just say really quickly, cyber risk management is a team sport, right? So buying cyber insurance should also be a team sport. So to Maria's point, reach out to whoever it is who's buying insurance, buying cyber insurance or buying, the insurance function at your organization, and really lean in and, spend time with your broker. Demand that they spend time with you. The best thing that I ever get in terms of emails, and I get 1,000 a day, is, hey, we want to spend time with you, Julian, and our CISO. Perfect. That is 1,000 times where I would like to spend my time. So, raise your hand, be a part of that conversation, be engaged. The other thing that I would add, just really last minute, is pull as much insight and intel out of the insurance market as you possibly can. The insurance companies see claims. They see claims all the time. That can be a huge intel thread for you as a security professional to see where other types of events and other types of attacks are coming from. That can really help you in terms of prioritizing and determining where your next investment dollar is. So really dig into that.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for your time.
This was really helpful. The reason I felt important to get over is because it is such, I think like as human risk professionals, like we're looking to be able to bring and add value to the cyber risk program with our organization. And like you just mentioned, I feel like getting value from how insurers are thinking about cyber risk and what I can do internally, like that just brings more to the table than maybe some of my peers are able to do when I think about this program. So thank you so much.